the big obvious happening that's meta-narrative to me is the fact that everyone's becoming Catholic. Not literally every one of your neighbors, not every one of my neighbors is becoming a Catholic in America. I live in Baptist country in Mississippi. They're not all, but I mean all the people with eyes to see. A lot of important people. Candace Owens just announced she's becoming Catholic. Russell Brand has been flirting with it, doing the rosary. Jordan Peterson has been flirting with it. His wife is Catholic. And everyone else. I'm not just this is not a show about the people who specifically have or are about to. It's about everyone knows there's something in the air. This was America, a Protestant peopled country initially, but it was a Catholic, an ideologically Catholic country. And now it's functioning secular. As my first book, Catholic Republic, quips in several lines. It was wired Catholic, labeled Protestant, and currently functioning secular. And then it got really secular, and at its nadir point, at the darkest point, which is kind of now, at its most secular juncture, America is seeing its leaders turn to Roman Catholicism for both the sacraments and the ideas. And I'm going to give you 5 reasons why the smart people are turning to Catholicism in today's show. Now, I want to go through the 5 reasons that I thought about this a lot. Important, smart folks with eyes to see and ears to hear are becoming Catholic. There are 5 of them. With list shows, I don't often tell you what the 5 items are ahead of time. I think it's worth doing today. The first reason that folks are who have eyes to see are becoming Catholic is because it is the only worldview under the sun that truly instantiates, truly expresses and participates in patriarchy through papacy. Patriarchy through papacy. That's number 1. To have true patriarchy, you need the papacy. Number 2, Pope Francis, quite arguably the worst pope of all time, number 266, shows something. This is point number 2. Francis is why people are converting. He's the rule-proving exception. Most popes are good. Some popes are greats and are actually canonized. The church actually guarantees they went to heaven, they were so good, they're associated with miracles, and they actually are canonized. Francis is arguably the worst pope of all time. I'm quite convinced of it. Why would folks convert under the reign of the worst pope of all time? I'll explain why. His papacy shows it rather clearly that he is the rule-proving exception. He proves the need for patriarchy through papacy, number 1, by seeing that the worst of all time still is requisite. Even the worst is better than none at all. There's a little more to it. Number 3, honest, smart folks are converting to Catholicism because there is only one resistor to the New World Order, and that is real hierarchy. Real hierarchy. Solovyov, the Russian mystic, makes a point about a father and his sons who are brothers that I just can't be overstated. And this is usually constitutive of a reason not to go Eastern Orthodoxy, but instead Catholicism. Even though we have our unique problems, they have their unique problems. Why Catholicism? We're going to talk about real hierarchy and Solovyov, the Russian mystic. Reason number 4, those who view intellectual history with any intellectual honesty at all, G.K. Chesterton often makes this point, must become Catholic. And I mean people that are either Protestant or sort of very secularized Protestant, which is what most people receive in America. Intellectual history received with intellectual honesty is the corrective to soft or hard Protestantism. And number 5 this is sort of an appeal to authority. The intelligentsia itself in this country has always been Catholic, the right-wing intelligentsia that's not Straussian. So, patriarchy through papacy, Pope Francis himself, real hierarchy, intellectual history with intellectual honesty, and the intelligentsia, an appeal to authority. Let's go through these one by one. And it should be a relatively quick show. Why is everyone who's smart becoming Catholic in a new way? It's not the new evangelization, by the way. It's not the new evangelization. That utterly failed. I'm sorry, J2P2's out there. Zzz, zzz, zzz. We love everything JP2 did. He didn't understand the youth as well as it seemed he did. Remember, he instituted World Youth Day, John Paul II. He's the one that everyone thought understood. Boomers really thought he understood the youth well. I don't think he did so much. He thought there needed to be a new evangelization through like technology and through niceness and through semi-ecumenism. I don't think he understood stuff very well. What it turns out has been the newer evangelization has been the return to tradition. Yes, it has happened through technology, through the internet, but I don't think this constitutes a win for the processes described by JP2. The newer evangelization has been just the return to the old evangelization, which is just always bring the gospel, use words. Remember how that quote is attributed falsely to St. Francis? Use words only when necessary. Now, use words often. Words are the best conveyors of meaning, bar none. There's no close second. Use words. And the word should be used to express the beauty of the 2,000-year-old faith, not just the faith, especially not the faith, that really began somewhere between 1962 and 1970. That was an attempt at a new evangelization that utterly failed. And JP2 just re-expressed that in the 90s. Okay, so it's really the old way that's always the new way, that's evergreen. That is what's attracted young people, is just the preconciliar church, the true liturgy, the true, rites and traditions and sacramentals that are associable with more the first 1900 years of Christianity rather than the last 100 years. And I straightforwardly don't think there's enough in John Paul II's approach to justify even a half win or something with this new evangelization that was talked about a lot when I was in high school and college, in the 90s and the early 2000s. There's not enough, because it's so straightforwardly just the old evangelization and particularly the old rites and ceremonies of the church that attract young people. And those 5 old ways are timeless, timelessly old. And that's what, if you take Candace Owens, I think, I talked to her husband, George. He's a tremendously smart guy. I'd love to do a weekly or monthly podcast with that guy, just because it's like when a couple of smart dudes get together and are just batting it around, shooting the breeze, I think it's edifying, right? I think, didn't they use some new model of classical education like the University of Kansas or something like that? We're just two well-educated guys who are deft thinkers talk in front of a bunch of students, and they kind of talk about whatever. That's how I ran that show with George, and man, he's just one of the smartest guys I've had on the show. And his wife followed his example because he's clearly a virtuous, smart man. And she's representative of a whole group of talented ex-Catholic, ex-Protestants who are becoming Catholic, Americans, those that are committed to what's good about America. So reason number one that everyone's becoming a Catholic is simply, it's the only worldview under the sun, papism, that establishes patriarchy through the papacy. So papism is the only patriarchy via the papacy. You can't have a worldview that reestablishes the patriarchal order while denying Papa. So dig this. Roman Catholicism is the true Christianity. It represents Christianity, simpliciter patriarchy. And Christianity is a bimodal, bifurcated patriarchy. There's a clerical patriarchy, the higher life, the priests and the bishops have a hierarchy. We're going to talk about that with point number 3. And they all subserve hierarchically Papa, the Pope. That's a patriarchy. And then the lower patriarchy, the second one, is the lay patriarchy, where each household, this is something JP2 got very correct. I give credit where it's due. He called each household an ecclesiola, or a church in miniature, and the father, the priest, prophet king of the home. So you get smart orthobros, and there are lots of smart ones and lots of manly ones, I like them, who understand that the father needs to be manly in the home, he needs to be in charge, and that lay patriarchy is correct. But it's an incomplete model if these orthobros, many of whom are my friends online, attempt to express a patriarchy that's not bimodal. Because then they go to church, and instead of looking at a clerical patriarchy that has a proper head, they're dealing with a headless patriarchy. Right? A snake without a head. I mean, that's a bad image because the snake is Luciferian. It's so horrible. But instead, they're looking at, it doesn't work. You need the bimodal patriarchy, a lay patriarchy full of celibate men, non-celibate men, they're getting some of their talking points, if they're not all students of theology, from the pulpit, from a celibate patriarchy that goes all the way to the top, to Papa. Goes all the way to Papa. And if you say, well, there's no Papa, but we want to reinstantiate the patriarchy the way Eastern Orthodoxy does, folks see this as a non-starter, if they have eyes to see. Patriarchy requires the papacy, the living vicar of Christ on earth.